I'm wondering your thoughts about this move from the White House and whether it can hold up in court.
It's a great question. We all certainly want to know the answer to that. And certainly I know many companies across the country are relieved today, seeing that they may not have state compliance, a patchwork to comply with. But I think it's important we not lose sight of the bigger picture. The federal regulation is a key piece of governance, but governance is really a much larger issue. It's what's happening within the companies that in many ways only they will know. Another key piece of this is in the courts. While we're looking at the state houses, the courthouses are going to be determining a lot of what the regulations are going to be and the requirements.
Well, give us a sense of how far along the states are. We were just talking about the California law, for instance. Will this be interrupting laws already on the books or those being crafted?
Both. I mean, they went from 19 laws over a 5-year span, starting at the end of the teens, to 1,000 bills in the last across the states in the last year. So it's certainly a lot of work underway that will be impacted should this go through. But there's also as many issues to be litigated within the court in those various state courts as well as the federal courts.
What do you make of the argument from the White House that if we're going to keep up, and as Scott Bessent says, you know, there's no second place. It's pass-fail when you're competing with China in what is an industrial revolution in their eyes, in the eyes of a lot of investors who are watching and listening to us right now. Is he right? Because a couple of days ago, we were talking about selling H-200 chips to China.
We have to win. I think that's true.
Does it require a national standard?
I think there's questions there about what needs to be in place. I think the key gap, though, the part that we're all missing is the adoption piece. You're seeing all the headlines about the lack of return of investment that all the companies are finding. They're investing hundreds of millions in AI. Yeah. They're not getting a return on their investment, and that's because people are not trusting AI, and it's because we're not giving measurements and protocols to deserve those trusts through governance.
Interesting. You talk in the book here about navigating the risks of AI. And a lot of folks right now are wondering if it's a bubble, if this spending's ever going to land, if these companies can get the money to begin with that have been promised, if vendor financing is a real thing here. How are you looking at this moment? A lot of folks say we're in the first or second inning. Others think the AI trade is starting to peter out.
I do think we're in the early days of AI. Yeah. I think when we look at the discoveries we've made over the past few years since it's become widespread have been groundbreaking, and I think we're on track to see many more groundbreaking innovations that are going to be unthinkable. We certainly could not imagine today what we'll be seeing in AI with several years. However, we will not see widespread adoption if we don't do more at this critical moment to make sure that our AI is trusted.
You heard our conversation with Congressman Obernolte, pretty well versed on this stuff. He's very close to the community and has been working with a lot of the companies building data centers in places like Barstow in his district. This is not across the board on Capitol Hill, as you probably well know. We can start with the age of a lot of lawmakers. In some cases, their allergy to technology. What's the learning curve for a legislator that might be writing a national standard in the weeks ahead?
You're right. That's an issue. We need more AI literacy across the country, and particularly for the policymakers who are creating these regulations. I will say in good news, we've come a long way. When we were talking about the Facebook hearings years ago where the legislatures just did not understand what that technology was, we've come a long way. Through Representative Obernolte's work and several others through the AI caucus, they've done a lot to educate themselves and their staffers. At Equal AI, we've also had programs to train staffers and make sure they really understood what is working, what's not. How do you monitor? How do you evaluate generative AI, let alone narrow AI that is in most of the systems that people are using in their HR and otherwise? Okay. So we have come a long way. We absolutely have a long way to go.
Use cases could help a lot. When people start wondering, what is this for? We've got another version of ChatGPT, and yeah, they've got a lot of people paying for it. But when do we get to the point where this is starting to change lives?
I think that is such an important point, the use cases. I think we're failing by not giving people use cases that are more meaningful to them.
Is that a matter of a lack of imagination, or this is a communication effort that needs to begin?
I think it starts with a communication effort. It starts by meeting people where they are. What's a use case that's going to be meaningful to the mother in Oklahoma, the family in Michigan? I think we are not doing a good enough job of telling them use cases, but also I think we have to have a meaningful conversation. What are they afraid of? We see that 50% of Americans at a minimum are afraid of AI, more afraid than excited.
Sure.
If you break that down, there's gender gaps, there's regional gaps, there's age gaps, which starts at 30, by the way. So if we think about those gaps, who's self-selecting out of AI, what's keeping them afraid? We need to have a conversation about what is the risk that they're afraid of so that we can tell them about the opportunity in a way they'll believe.
The age gap starts at 30. Would that suggest people under 30 are not afraid of this technology and would be more likely to embrace it?
Much more excited and enthusiastic.
They're not worried about not having a job because a lot of the stories here, if you're coming out of school right now, you know, AI might have just gobbled up that position you would have had a couple of years ago. If you're a coder, forget about it.
I think the workforce displacement is top on most minds, particularly of the young people today, but it's not keeping them from trying it and using it in the way that it is for people over 30.
Okay.
And that's just one of, in our book, we have 9 categories of risk. Workforce displacement is huge, but for other people, the privacy concerns are equally huge. The security concerns, the hallucinations, each of these need to be addressed before different constituents are open to it. So that's why we think of governance as really the unlock for AI use.
When's the shakeout with these companies that are putting up massive deals and announcements every day? The, you know, rising tide lifts all boats until some of them begin to fail.
I think that's why we need to immediately act with governance and literacy. If more companies, you know, what 80–90% of companies are using AI, less than a third have a governance system in place. That means if you're in a company that's investing and putting all these AI tools out there, but not telling people what's a use that is sanctioned, what is a use that is not advisable, or what is a use that is absolutely not ever going to be permitted. If we're not explicit about what it is and how it's used, if we're not telling people how it's being tested, how we're making sure that it's safe for them inside the companies, let alone the consumers, we can never expect adoption.
Well, this is interesting. As more people have a personal experience with AI, does acceptance increase?
It's a really good point. We see the data shift significantly when people are more comfortable with AI. We see with the experts, 42% are more excited than concerned about AI. That is compared to 11% of the population. Wow. 72% believe it will help more than hurt them. That's in the 40s for the general population. So yeah, there's up to a quarter, 4 times more opportunity for engagement and trust if you understand it.